Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a highly debated breakdown of Portugal's World Cup opener against DR Congo. We're looking at a squad that came in as heavy pre-tournament favorites, only to completely stumble out of the gate. So what went wrong? Well, we are going to explore exactly what the source material claims is actively holding this incredibly talented roster back. Let's get right into it.
Right off the bat, the source material drops an absolute bombshell. It literally describes Portugal's performance as walking out onto the pitch trying to win a World Cup match with 10 men and a statue. I mean, wow. It's a remarkably heavy critique, and it centers entirely on one of the most famous, most recognizable athletes on the planet, Cristiano Ronaldo.
To really set the scene for us, the author vividly describes this one specific telling moment. Picture this. A perfectly placed cross floats to the back post. This is exactly the kind of ball Ronaldo has built his entire mythology around, right? But he just didn't jump. A Congo defender easily cleared it away. The source uses this missed header as this powerful, almost sad metaphor to argue that a historic era in football is officially ending right before our very eyes.
Okay, let's move into our first section, the leap that never came, setting the stage for a stalled legend. Let's see how this whole narrative builds, especially when you contrast Portugal's match against the explosive performances of other global icons during that exact same week.
Because look at the context here. The day before Ronaldo played, Lionel Messi scored a hat-trick, tying the all-time World Cup scoring record. Kylian Mbappe scored twice, becoming France's all-time leading scorer. Erling Haaland scored twice on his debut. The stage was literally perfectly set for Ronaldo to respond against a Congo side playing in their very first World Cup in 52 years. But instead, Portugal labored to a 1-1 draw, and Ronaldo was completely shut out.
That brings us to Section 2, the brutal numbers, what the data actually says. Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is how the author uses these brutal, objective statistics to neutrally back up their really heavy critique of the superstar.
And the data reveals a pretty shocking disconnect. Despite Portugal absolutely dominating the ball with 75% possession, they somehow managed exactly one shot on target the entire game. Just one. Meanwhile, Congo, operating with just a quarter of the possession, actually generated a higher expected goals total, more total shots, and more shots on target than the tournament favorites.
Focusing directly on the center of Portugal's attack, the source points out a staggering number, 25 touches. That is the absolute fewest touches of any Portugal outfield player who lasted the full 90 minutes. The article makes the argument that he wasn't even necessarily doing things badly on the ball, he was simply a void. They basically say he contributed less than the kit man for over an hour of play.
But the core statistical argument really comes down to this difference in team output. When Ronaldo starts, Portugal averages 1.9 goals a game. And actually, the source notes that number is heavily propped up by a previous 9-1 blowout. But when he does not start, that average jumps to 2.8 goals per game. Essentially, they are nearly a full goal better per match. The author uses this to firmly assert that the team is just demonstrably better without him in the starting 11.
And the source argues this isn't just some brief slump. Ronaldo has now gone 10 consecutive major tournament games across World Cups and Euros without scoring. That is over 800 minutes out there on the pitch. Think about that. His last non-penalty goal at this elite level was all the way back in June of 2021.
Let's dive into Section 3, Ego over Team, analyzing the cutback play. We're going to dissect a very specific on-field moment the source uses to show exactly how this personal goal drought is impacting the entire squad's dynamic.
So the article highlights this massive missed chance from a cutback. Bruno Fernandes was sitting in a perfect position for a tap-in, but Ronaldo intercepted the pass meant for him and missed it wide. This drew heavy criticism from pundits, notably Thierry Henry, who just bluntly said, "The team needs to score, not you." It perfectly exposes this frustrating situation where the desire for a personal goal completely overrode a guaranteed team goal.
The crucial point the author is trying to make here is that it's a vicious cycle. The historic drought breeds this intense desperation, right? And that desperation leads to selfishness on the ball, which actively costs Portugal points. It's effectively strangling the potential of a squad that is, frankly, more than good enough to win the whole tournament.
Which brings us to Section 4, the scared manager, enabling the system. Because, as you'll see, the source doesn't just blame the 41-year-old player for all of this. It firmly shifts a huge chunk of the responsibility onto the manager, Roberto Martinez, for enabling this entire dynamic.
The article highlights what it calls an undeniable pattern in the substitutions against Congo.
Martinez takes off key creative players like Bernardo Silva and Pedro Neto. And then, most glaringly, when he desperately needed a goal and brought on a new striker in Gonzalo Ramos, he didn't take off Ronaldo, who, remember, hadn't managed a single shot on target. No, instead, he removed a crucial midfielder, Vitinha, just to keep Ronaldo out on the pitch.
When the press questioned him about these exact decisions, Martinez defended his choices by insisting it makes no sense to take off the best goal scorer in the history of football. But the author argues this defense completely gives the game away. I mean, look at the word history. The article insists that history is strictly in the past tense, and that Martinez is being held captive by past glory rather than analyzing the present reality unfolding right in front of him.
The critique here is just incredibly sharp. As pundit Chris Sutton noted, the manager seems completely terrified to make the tough call. The source concludes that Martinez is out there managing a ghost of who Ronaldo used to be, rather than the struggling player who is currently on the pitch.
Moving along to Section 5, A Tale of Two Legends, The Importance of Adaptation. To really drive the point home, the explainer uses a fascinating comparison to show that a player's raw age isn't the only factor at play here. Take Lionel Messi, another aging legend. The source points out that Argentina successfully built a system around him specifically because he adapted. He dropped deeper, he became a creator, and he let the younger, faster players run beyond him. Portugal, on the other hand, caters to a legend who refuses to change his role. He's still trying to be the focal point number 9, demanding service, even though he just lacks the legs to play that role effectively anymore.
Now, to be fair, the source totally concedes that Ronaldo could still be a highly effective weapon, but it suggests alternative tactical roles, like, being an impact substitute off the bench, similar to how Ancelotti uses Neymar, or even acting as a tactical decoy to drag defenders out of shape. But there's a catch, right? All of these uses require one massive, fundamental change. Ronaldo has to start on the bench.
Oh, and adding a wild little twist to all of this, the article notes a pretty cruel detail. Ronaldo actually shouldn't have even been on the pitch for this game. He was supposed to be suspended for a red card he got against Ireland. The source suggests that FIFA's desperate desire to keep famous faces front and center resulted in a suspended ban which actually ended up sabotaging Portugal. Think about it. Had the ban been enforced, the manager would have been forced to test a completely new attacking shape.
So the source leaves us with this really powerful summary. Portugal has one of the absolute deepest squads in the entire tournament, yet they risk throwing it all away simply because a manager is too frightened to make the obvious call. We'll leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. Are they sacrificing a World Cup on the altar of one man's ego? Or is there still some magic left in those boots to produce one last miracle? Let us know your takeaway, and thanks for joining me on this explainer. See you next time.